I know this isn't the standard type of video that I normally do, but I wanted to record this while I was thinking about it. I was thinking earlier today about the nature of being a whore. And I don't mean necessarily in the sexual sense, I just mean in the spiritual, philosophical, ethical, and theological sense. Like, what does it mean to be a whore? And, the modern definition would probably just say anybody who is sexually promiscuous. But that's not what being a whore really is. What being a whore really is sacrificing something sacred for selfish or carnal gain. Let me give you an example. I had something that I had for sale on the private market, and I had found somebody to buy it for $900. It's like, okay. And I was taking a little bit of a loss, maybe like a $50 loss by doing this. Plus, I was having to drive 45 minutes in order to do it. And we got the deal finalized, and the deal hasn't taken place yet. But then, earlier today, another person offered me the same amount of money, except I probably wouldn't have to drive more than 5 minutes, as opposed to 45 minutes for the same deal. And the practical, the lizard brain bean counter in me, was really tempted. The temptation was there to take this new deal for the same amount of money, but less travel time and less gas. And I probably could have done it today instead of driving 45 minutes tomorrow morning after work, like I had planned to do with the first buyer. And I was really, really tempted to take this deal because it's so much more convenient and it saves me money in the long run. But then I thought, that's not principled. It's not principled to cancel your original deal just because you got a better offer. Now, you can tell the original buyer that and say like, hey, look, I got another deal that this other guy is willing to pay me the same amount of money as what you're paying me, except he could probably do it tonight instead of tomorrow after work, and I would maybe have to drive 5 minutes instead of 45. But that's not really fair, to be perfectly honest with you. I know that's not good business sense. I know that's not the most practical way of doing things, but it's not the honorable way of doing things. The honorable way of doing things is to not whore yourself out, because it occurred to me that what I'm doing there is I'm sacrificing my integrity. I've made a deal with this other guy, and as a matter of honor, I have to hold to this other deal, even though this new deal is better. It doesn't matter, because your principles aren't really your principles until you've had to sacrifice for them. Until they've been put to the test, until you've been tempted to jettison them for one reason or another for personal gain. And it suddenly occurred to me that that is the definition of a whore. A whore is someone who will sacrifice their principles, which are sacred. Your principles are sacred, and you can't sacrifice them. So if you're willing to sacrifice your principles, which are sacred, for something carnal, something profane, not profane, but something selfish, like money, especially money, because the love of money is the root of many evils, then you've effectively made yourself a whore. And you can't do that. You have to have integrity. And That's just something to really think about, because society tells you go where the money is, because society worships money, because money is a tool that serves the self. So ultimately, society serves the self. You see what I'm saying? Like, the bad nature of society is completely narcissistic and Luciferian in its self-worship. But that's not right. What's right is to hold to the sacred things. And what are the sacred things? Well, your principles. So, you have to hold to your principles. I could have taken the ticket. I could have made the same amount of money, driven 5 minutes. All I would have had to do is make up some lie, and say, hey, I'm sorry, first buyer, I can't sell it to you. Something came up. I'm sorry, or tell them the truth and be like, hey, look, I got a better deal. Do you want to try and best it? Because if not, then I'm going to go with this other deal. You could do that, but you and I both know that that's crappy of you to do that. And it would have been crappy of me to do that. Integrity. It's like in the novels, Michael the Archangel, especially in the first book, is beset on all sides with temptations. And he has to really fight to put those temptations aside and do the right thing. And what is the right thing? Well, the right thing is often the thing that doesn't feel good. And it really would have felt good to drive 5 minutes, still make my $900, and be able to get it done in probably, a timelier fashion, and be done with it and have my money in the pocket. But I can't worship money. I can't make my decisions based solely on money. I have to make my decisions based on integrity. And if I don't, then I have made myself a whore. You see what I'm saying? I'm belaboring the point, but I think you get it. What is being a whore? It's not selling your body for money. It's not selling yourself as a sexual plaything for money. I mean, that is part of it, because being, your sexuality and your body are sacred, but that's the deeper root. The deeper root of whoredom that's why they call it whoring yourself out, because you are selling something sacred and making it profane in the pursuit of something that is carnal and terrestrial and not divine. You're violating the divine when you do that. So it's something to think about, man. Comport yourself and live your life with integrity. Don't live it being a whore. You can chase the dollar, but you'll wind up destitute. And if you instead chase integrity, which is Logos and God, then you'll come out ahead. You'll, at the very least, you might not come out ahead financially, but you'll at least be able to lay your head down on the pillow at night, and you'll be able to live with yourself, and you won't have any crippling addictions that you have to use to mask the guilt that you justifiably feel. Chances are, if you have an addiction like that, it's because maybe you're not living the way you should. And I see that all the time, and I get it. I'm not harping on anybody for having an addiction, but what I'm saying is you need to reflect on why you have that, and maybe what you're doing, what are you covering up? Because I see a lot of people who use substance abuse in one form or another to cover up stuff that they don't want to face about themselves. And that's the hard reality of addiction that no one wants to talk about. Everyone wants to say, like, oh, I'm addicted to this or that because I was abused, or I was molested, or I was, I had a hard life, or blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there are a lot of people that are like that. But you know what? There are a lot of people who are addicted to stuff because they make trashy, low quality, low trust, bad character decisions because they have bad character, and they're having to live with the consequences, and the only way they can live with themselves is to drug themselves into a stupor every day. Something to think about. Viva con Dios.